Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and in this video we'll be talking Nioh's beta. First up, if you don't know what Nioh is or haven't seen my other video, you might want to go and watch the other video, as I'll be touching on some of the same subjects I brought up in that. You can follow the on-screen annotation here, or the link in the description there, to the video covering the alpha. So we had an alpha for Nioh a few months ago which was really promising, but also had a bunch of issues, and now the developers have addressed a great many of them. But have they kept the spirit of the game intact? Is it better? Is it worse? Well, first up I'll cover the new content of the beta, and then I'll go through some of my biggest complaints of the alpha, and if they did anything about them. So the beta starts with the same stage as the alpha, although if you've cleared the alpha, you are given the option to skip the first stage. Beyond this, you also have an entirely new second stage of comparable size to the first. These are the main or story missions, and there's also 2 sub-missions or side quests. On top of that, there's also a new short tutorial that takes place in a dojo and gives you a chance to get used to the controls, and also gives us a look at what the game looks like in daytime, in a more aesthetically pleasing area. The shrine level featuring a Nioh from the alpha is not present in the beta, so no more stunning giant lightning dog cat things into oblivion. Other than stages, the other major new features of the beta are, well, 1 new melee weapon and 1 new ranged weapon, the dual katanas for melee and hand cannons, guns for ranged. Oh, and there's 1 new guardian spirit, a bull, of which I forget the name. And there's 2 new bosses to fight, Tachibana Muneshige and Hino Enma. And once again, I'm going to have to apologise for my butchering of Japanese names, because I'm terrible at pronouncing them. But what is Nioh? Well, as I probably said during my alpha video, Nioh is what would happen if you took Ninja Gaiden, Onimusha, Jedi Outcast, and Dark Souls, and put them all up in a blender. The most obvious comparisons are, of course, the most topical as well, with Dark Souls. If you've played Dark Souls, you'll notice many of the same elements and building blocks here. Unlike Dark Souls, however, Nioh is mission-based. You have a map screen and you select your missions from the map screen, rather than one large open world for you to explore seamlessly. You also play as a specific character, William Adams, rather than making your own. Also, Nioh is much harder than Dark Souls. If Dark Souls is a 5, for example, and Ninja Gaiden a 10 on the difficulty scale, Nioh would be a 7 or an 8 to give you an idea. Of course, this is an action RPG, so if you're struggling, you can always level up until you'll be able to somewhat overpower bosses. Again, if you're looking for more info on the basic kind of gameplay, please do check out my alpha video, where I went into a whole bunch more detail. So, moving on, let's talk about some of the major gameplay differences between the alpha and beta. And the majority of these changes are the direct result of player feedback following a survey of the alpha. First up, the level up rate has been reduced drastically since the alpha. Weapon durability has been removed entirely and replaced with a familiarity system. The more you use a weapon, the more familiar you become with it. Same deal with armor, there's no more armor durability. Camera and player lock-on behavior has changed. Unfortunately, it's very hard to explain how, other than saying it's better now. William will no longer stop and catch his breath when the ki gauge is empty, that's the stamina gauge, only if he's out of ki/stamina and receives an attack. There are now twice as many item shortcut quick use slots, and weapon shortcuts have been moved to their own area entirely, which is good. Several skills require different button inputs, simplified generally. Instead of pressing like, I don't know, 360 and then triangle, it's just L1 and triangle or something like that. Enemies will no longer chase you nearly as far as they used to. There are more and better shortcuts in the levels. Various balance changes to enemy health, damage, super armor, and so forth. And a password and matching system for online play. Hurrah! So let's talk about each of those in a little more detail. The level up rate I can't confirm, but I'm sure I reached around level 40 in the alpha, whereas I'm only level 20 in the beta. It just feels a lot slower to level up. Kind of like the difference between Dark Souls 1 and 2. In Dark Souls 1, you'll end the game at like, I don't know, maybe level 70, whereas in Dark Souls 2 it feels like you're going to end the game at like level 100 or something. You level up a lot faster. Weapon durability being removed is a really good idea in my opinion. Nioh is the sort of game where you literally carry around hundreds of weapons and armor after a few hours of playing. So whilst the concept of using a weapon and replacing it when it broke was kind of viable, it's very rarely a system that players will enjoy. If all the swords were identical, then yes. If you were just getting like 5 identical longswords and they never changed or upgraded, then yeah, sure, use one till it breaks, then swap to another one. But in a loot-based game, such as this, a player's gonna find a legendary katana of Oni bursting, and it has super cool bonuses like +5 to pumping or something, you know? They're gonna want to keep that for a while, and I'm personally very happy with durability being removed. Does it make the game easier? Not really. It just makes it so you don't have to fret about carrying whetstones and all your weapons breaking and stuff. Whetstones, by the way, I believe they now increase your familiarity, and I believe that familiarity has various effects such as increasing the amount that the weapon sells for. There's also a new system called soul matching available in the beta. It's a little hard to explain, but if you've played Destiny and used its infusing system, you'll know what to expect. Let's say I have a level 5 spear and a level 15 spear. I want to use the level 5 spear, but because it's 10 levels behind, it's kind of, it's getting outmatched on the damage. So I can soul match it with the level 15 version. It will essentially keep the level 5 spear the same, it will keep all its, bonuses and all that the same, but it will increase its level and thus its damage and viability to 15. Say in Dark Souls you have a longsword +5 and a short sword +10. You could soul match it and it would make it into a longsword +10. So if you find a weapon that you really like the look of, or has a special effect that you want to keep, it's great for that. You can also reforge weapons, which allows you to reroll the bonus attributes or effects that they get. Very similar to Diablo 3 there. The changes to the key gauge are also very interesting. In the alpha, if you drained all of your stamina, William would pause and catch his breath. This was a death sentence most of the time. Personally, I didn't mind it because it just meant the game was punishing you for running out of stamina. Which meant you shouldn't run out of stamina, obviously. But at the same time, it is very easy to run out of stamina when you're using the high stance, which consumes it like there's no tomorrow. So in the beta, if you run out of stamina, you can still move, but under certain circumstances, such as, I believe, being hit, you will enter the, pause and catch your breath state. Basically, it's very important to manage your ki in this game, a lot more than it is managing stamina in Dark Souls, but it also gives you a lot more tools to manage your stamina than does Dark Souls. Speaking of which, in the alpha you could ki pulse, the act of concentrating at a specific time to regenerate ki, by evading whilst in low stance. Usually you would do it by tapping R1 at the right time, but you could also do it by evading in low stance, which was obviously, superior as you were doing 2 things at the same time. This has been removed in the beta, but the same function has been added to the high stance evade. What this effectively seems to mean is that, in my eyes, the high stance is now the best, because, it has the best damage, and you can ki pulse evade thing. But all of the stances have their uses. Low stance is really fast and allows you to combo enemies, like there's no tomorrow, whilst dodging like a madman. Mid stance is all about blocking and counters, and tends to have wider sweep attacks, useful for multiple enemies. High stance is the slow, heavy stance that allows you to dish out the big damage. Obviously mixing it up is good, but I imagine most players will tend towards a certain style. Maybe one player will focus on high stance with the spear, that's what I do a lot of the time, whereas another player will tend to focus on counters and ripostes with a katana in mid stance. Or maybe dual katanas in low stance where you just go ham. It's great. The item shortcuts being expanded, oh my god, thank you, this is an amazing change. In my alpha video, I stated, and I quote, "You have up on the D-pad which is for elixirs, left on the D-pad which is for swapping weapons, and then down and right are the only 2 slots left. That just isn't enough. We need a way to either cycle through them or have modifiers for them, such as holding down another button and then pressing the D-pad." And guess what? Now you have up, down, left and right, and if you press L2, you have another set of up, down, left, right D-pads. Weapon swapping is now done by holding R1 and pressing left or up. left for melee, up for ranged. I cannot express how good this change is, and considering it's exactly what I was speaking of, that makes me happy. Item shortcuts are no longer an issue. You can have 8 items instead of 2. So yeah, there's no problems with that now, other than me as the player being stupid and forgetting which one I'm on. Okay, so how about shortcuts and enemies chasing you? During my alpha video I remarked on how it frustrated me in the first level that there's fire blocking your way through the level, but when you get behind the fire, there's no way to extinguish the flames to, you know, open a shortcut, and that I thought there should be a bucket of water there. Well, guess what? When I was playing the beta with Doug, he literally came across a giant bucket of water positioned in such a way that kicking it extinguishes the flames. That's awesome. And if you run away from enemies, you will now actually be able to run away from them. After a certain amount of time, or distance, or whatever, they will tether and head back to their original location. This is amazing because, as I mentioned before, if enemies chase you forever, it allows all sorts of game exploits. Then let's talk online. In the alpha, there was no way to play with your friends other than trying to matchmake at the same time and hope for the best. Never worked for me, personally. In the beta, there's a secret word system, aka a password. If you've played Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3, you know what to expect here. If 2 players use the same password, they will match with each other. There's also a new Torii gate system in the map screen that seems to be used for matchmaking with friends, but I was unable to try that out. But me and Doug set our passwords to Doug, and then instantly and consistently he managed to summon me quickly for some co-op shenanigans, during which I discovered a horn item in my inventory that, when tooted, appears to summon all nearby enemies to come running over to you. I think that about covers it for the comparisons. Is there anything bad about the beta compared to the alpha? Honestly, I think the beta is better than the alpha in every way. I don't know if it's performing better, because I honestly don't remember that well how the alpha was performing, but I didn't really notice any, you know, like terrible frame rates, so I'm assuming it's either the same or better. Every single change has been for the better, I would argue. Some people have been worried that the game was being dumbed down or made too easy, but I would disagree. The first boss, who was in the alpha and the beta, he's harder in the beta. The second boss is way harder than new, and Muneshige? Don't get me started on Muneshige. I can't pronounce his name and he's stupid. I would warrant that he killed me more than every single Dark Souls boss combined. Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3. I must have spent 2 hours fighting that bastard, in near 100-degree heat too. 100 Fahrenheit, not Celsius. But you know, that didn't help. And even though I was swearing like a sailor, I'm still looking forward to playing Nioh, and I want more, because even though it's so hard, it's really fun, and I really like it. Do I have any worries about the game then? Well, yeah. I still take issue with the healing items that Nioh has. Whilst they have introduced more healing items in the beta, such as, you know, a rare healing item, I take umbrage with the healing elixirs. Yeah, they introduced something I specifically asked for again with the last video. If you have 10 elixirs and pick up another, it is sent to your item storage now. Praise Zeus and Odin and all those guys for that. And yet, why can't we buy healing elixirs? Sometimes you can get one at random when selling items, but please, you have an item vendor on the map screen who sells ammo and, like, antidotes and stuff. Just let her sell healing elixirs. It won't make the game too easy, it will just make it more convenient and fun to play. Same with removing durability. These aren't difficulty things, they're just tedious things, and letting you buy healing elixirs will make the game a lot less tedious. If they add a vendor who sells them, or otherwise makes it so it's easier to acquire them, I'd have zero problems with the game at the moment. That's the only issue I still have with it, really. Oh, although I should say, at some point during the beta, it felt like my minimum healing elixirs seemed to increase. Let me try and explain. When you spawn with 3 healing elixirs. At some point, I don't know when, it seemed that I was spawning with 4 instead, so, you know, that would be a perfectly fine alternative if, as you progress through the game, you gradually start with more by default. Honestly though, they should just copy the Estus system from Dark Souls entirely, or the Bloodborne system entirely, because Blood Vows and Bloodborne are okay, but the Estus system in Dark Souls is as close to perfect as a game mechanic can get, in my opinion. Overall though, I had so much fun with the alpha, and I'm really happy to see that almost all of my problems have been improved with the beta. I'm also pleasantly surprised because so many alphas and betas are just glorified demos where they hardly change anything. Or they might go, oh, is there like a game-breaking bug, or does this gun one-shot every player on the server? I guess we'll fix that before release. Whereas Nioh has taken player feedback directly and worked with it. They've listened to what the fans and the players have been saying, and they've acted on that. And that's really encouraging, and I'm really looking forward to the game's release. But is there anything else I'd like to see from the game? Well, for starters, I think it'd be awesome if we could play as other characters. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with William, aka Samurai Geralt, Witcher dude, aka Ken Summer. I think he's a pretty cool guy. But I find it a little vexing that in co-op we essentially summon another William, considering there appears to be the basic framework for a character select screen on the map. I'm really hoping that's the case, and in the final game we'll be able to play as other characters. Even if it's just for co-op, like, they don't have to replace William for the story, I'm not asking that, I just want, in co-op, let us play as other characters. Let us play as Tachibana Muneshige, or, what's his wife called, Ginchio, and... You know, and Hanzo, and all these characters I know from Samurai Warriors. Other than that, more weapons would be lovely. I'm sure we'll get them though. I'm sure they're not just having what we've got in the alpha and beta. Though I do wonder if they'll be as good as the ninjutsu and magic, because damn, in the beta, ninjutsu is insanely good. I summoned one guy, he was just throwing like bombs everywhere. Oh my, it was insane. Same with magic. Almost the opposite of the Souls games there, so it'll be interesting to see how it's balanced. More daytime levels would also be great, because the game has some nice visuals, and it's a shame so much of it is really dark. On that note, this video is 30 frames per second because I was having a bit of trouble with my recording thing, so I had to use PS4 Share, and PS4 Share only records at 30 FPS. But the game does go at 60 FPS. If you go in action mode, it's close to 60. If you go in movie mode, it's 30, so I probably should have done it in movie mode, but whatever. That said, thank you so much for watching. You can close the video now. I'm going to mention a few neat things that are kind of spoilers that you might not want to know, but if you're still here, alright then. So Nioh now has, illusory wall mimics, which are probably the best thing I've ever seen. I was walking around near a wall when suddenly it had two glowing eyes. I stared at it for a while, and then it came to life and tried to flatten me, so I had to pummel it to death. There was another one later on. When I found it, I bowed to it, and then I think it bowed back and just, like, decided to, like, peace out and left me behind some items. So that was interesting. I've also heard from a friend that they found some sort of mimic, a mimic chest, and when they did like Simon Says with it, the chest did a gesture, they did a gesture, and then it left them loot and vanished. I wonder though, with the wall, if I had not bowed but done another gesture, would it have attacked me? Was it because I bowed? Was it specifically bowing, or was it just a random gesture? Well, I guess we'll find out with the full game. I'm very interested to see what kind of secrets and little things like that the game has. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.